All right. Welcome everybody to the Smooth Brain Society. Today we have on Associate Professor Mehmet Orhan. He is the Associate Professor in Management and Organizational Behavior at Normandie Business School. He just mentioned that he's started a new job somewhere else, so we will get him to talk about that as well. But before that, he was also the head of International Management Program at Paris School of Business. He's also worked at Charles University at the Czech Republic, Tilburg University in Netherlands, and Vrij University in Belgium. He has come on today to talk about his work on authorship inequality, elite dominance, and the ethical and problematic issues of doing science and academic careers. This would be very interesting because usually when you think of elite dominance, you think of something in terms of business and oligarchy and things. So I like the idea of talking about it in terms of science and academia. And as always, as the way the show goes, for people who are new here, the way we do it is me and a co-host who basically have no idea of our researchers' work will sit and kind of not just pretend, but we have no idea about their work. So their job is to try to explain it to us. Our co-host today is Emma Christensen. She's a friend of mine from about 8 years now, right, Emma? Yeah, ages. But I'll let her introduce herself and the work she does, and then we can get on to the podcast.
Thank you, Sahir. Yes, my name is Emma. I work mainly in the nonprofit field. I have experience from street children, trafficking, now with the rights of people with disabilities. And my interests are marginalized people's power, violence and abuse, exploitation, all in that field. So I'm really excited to talk to you today, Mehmet.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks for having me. So probably my accent can turn off many of your listeners, so there is kind of a warning that I would like to give. Precisely for that reason, they should stay. They should stick around because we're going to talk about the problems in academia, underrepresentation, overrepresentation, and issues alike, and the related ethical problems. So I can also welcome the listeners. My name is Mehmet Orhan. As Sahir mentioned, I am currently in Paris, attached to the EM Normandie Business School in France. But in a couple of weeks, I will be starting my new position at Bruckelen, at Nijrode Business School in the Netherlands. So basically, that's it. I think we're going to discuss the remaining issues.
Awesome. So we start where we start with everyone. Could you give us a bit of background into why you got into this kind of research, a little bit about your journey and what interested you in this kind of field?
Sure, with pleasure, of course. So I can talk about my past research projects, which were related to virtual work, remote work, and issues alike, like the technology used in the organizational setting. But during the COVID, I also realized that this issue has become more pertinent, more relevant. And at the same time, I realized more and more researchers have started talking about these issues, although they had no previous maybe idea or knowledge about the literature or expertise in the field. They started becoming an expert in the field, virtual teams, remote work, and things alike. But then I also realized that these authors were quite senior and elite scholars, that they heavily recited themselves and circulated their ideas, which were not necessarily related to the pandemic conditions, because during the pandemic we had a lot of different, idiosyncratic challenges that caused many issues. Because, like, if you think remote work as a flexibility that is provided to mostly knowledge workers and corporate executives in the past, but now with COVID, everyone had to start with working remotely. But then we also realized that inequalities have been more problematic. Technological infrastructure has become a major issue, and many things alike, like your family conditions, your settings, your living environment. All these things have impacted the experiences. But on the other hand, we have started reading the papers from these elite scholars that, as I said, they replicated themselves. And I was interested to what extent editors allowing space to these senior authors, and to what extent senior authors have or had privileged access to the journal space. So basically, I was interested to unpack the authorship inequality in the field. Usually I can talk mostly for management and organizational research. That includes organizational behavior, human resource management, and similar topics. But the idea I picked was during the COVID time.
Nice. So that's super interesting. Can we talk about, so when you're talking about elite researchers and self-publishing, what do you mean for someone who does not know about these things? So for most people, don't even have access to a lot of journal articles because they're behind paywalls, let alone know how the process works. So if you could give someone a background into that, that'd be nice.
Sure, of course. So this is actually a very broad topic, and it's a very difficult question, Sahir. So I'll try to unpack it, of course. But maybe I can talk a little bit about how the science is conducted. So everyone may know who are following your channel, your podcasts. But in order to build your academic career, you have to be publishing. So publications are the currency of within our system, and of course, where you publish is a quite an important determinant about your career. So it's expected that your work is appearing in high impact journals. And these high impact journals, they signal or they convey the messages that they are fair, they're open, they're accessible to all kinds of researchers. But at the same time, we see the same names, the same authors to be publishing in their journals more and more. So then the question becomes, as again, to what extent there are biases, editorial biases. Although we know that the publication review process is kind of fair and there are blind processes in order to avoid the identities, still editors have enormous power in the system. So once a researcher submits a paper, a manuscript, the editor has a full sight about the article, the sender, affiliations, and everything. So recently we know a research by Nobel-winning laureate Vernon, who tried to send publications with his research assistant, and they realized that their names, of course, make a difference. So even though you try to publish the same manuscript, your name, your affiliations would eventually play a role in the editor's mind. So although we believe that the system is perfectly fair and to that extent open to diverse researchers, the reality is far from that. Once an editor sees your affiliation, your name, of course, makes up an idea about the quality of a paper, the process, and everything. So I am saying this with this confidence because I have some numerical or empirical evidence to talk about. Basically, of course, yeah. One more thing that I would like to mention. Once a manuscript is submitted to a journal, editors, associate editors, the editorial team rejects up to 95% of submissions, of which 80% can be desk reject. Like once an editor sees a paper, has an idea about whether to go with the review process or not. So these desk rejections, again, I wanted to understand if, again, some researchers had the privileged access or any kind of proof that we can start investigating these issues. I don't know if I managed to address your concern.
No, you definitely did. That gives a good idea of kind of how the process works and where potential biases could be. You mentioned you had numerical data to support this. Before coming on, you told me about a couple papers which you're planning on publishing and so on about this. Question one: Do you think the fact that you're publishing papers showing about the biases in this field themselves have problems being published? And then I can ask the second serious question.
Yes and no again. So I'm not doing all these things by myself, by the way. I collaborate with my closest academic friends, Matthijs Bal from the University of Lincoln from the UK and Yvonne van Rosenberg from Radboud University in Nijmegen. So we are collectively trying to address these issues. And as you said, yes, it is a problem. So we are trying to build a kind of a critical lens and try to publish it in the field of organizational research that is, we believe that is problematic. So there is already kind of a paradoxical situation. So, and also, I was going to say that, just one second, I was going to say one thing about that. Oh, yeah. So the thing is, we are also trying to show the evidence from the positivistic perspective. Although we are trying to build a critical lens or a critical stance about these issues, the way how we do it is kind of positivistic. So we have the numerical evidence, we have the support from a data that editors shouldn't be saying that we are kind of biased in our own views as well. So again, we are trying to be as objective as possible, but at the same time as critical as possible too. So this is the idea. But as you said, sometimes the ideas are not quite well received by the editors because we are pointing out the systematic and problematic issues. But again, our aim is to indicate that things could be improved. So our essential goal is to generate hope for the newcomers, for the new generations of researchers, and at the same time to indicate that things could have been done or could be done better.
I think it's like your position is very interesting because you're sort of like within the structure itself that you're criticizing. So like the call is coming from inside the house, and as you said, like it's not being well received all the time. But do you in some ways still have to play the game that you're talking about, like when you're in that structure, or how do you navigate that?
All right. Yes and no. The right answer is yes and no, Emma. Thanks for this question. Yes, I believe that we shouldn't be publishing all these things in the journal space. So it's okay to share this. I mean, the idea of publication is to communicate, first of all. So we would like to communicate our ideas, and channels are numerous. So now I'm talking to you guys, but we will be having some listeners. And even when they hear about these things, we are kind of generating new ideas. We are communicating. So I would like to disseminate my research results. The same way we can use the internet, we can use YouTube, we can use multiple channels, TikTok, whatever you name it. So the idea is to communicate the findings. So we would like to disturb the machine to some extent. We would like to share these things with the community that has taken it. And I think this is quite important. But again, if these things are not published, or let's say that they are rejected in the review process for any reasons, we would like to collect all these papers and publish it as a book. This is the idea. So yes, we are. I mean, you may feel or you may think that we are playing the game and we are kind of getting the benefiting from playing the game from the other way around, but no. So we are trying to show things and we are trying to communicate things with the right audience and using the right channels. But again, the findings are there, and I also have some problems with the existing system, right? We should be having kind of the open process about the reviews. So I would like to disseminate my findings. I would like to talk about what I found, what I think, and then whatever thinks, they can raise concerns, they can talk, we can discuss. And journal process is like kind of a one-shot game. You publish, and unless someone finds an error, it stays there. Maybe they are retracted if some errors are found, but otherwise they are like snapshots, never a kind of an ongoing debate. So although science should be based on discussions, debates, and disagreements as well. So in order to facilitate that, journal space may not be the right place at all.
Very nice. So we've talked about playing the game, but you said you have numbers to back this up. Can we talk about your research that way? And kind of like, what you did, what was the data collection process? What were you actually looking at? And and then we can talk about what the results were after that.
Sure. Thank you again. So can I also ask you guys your own field? So you guys are also researchers as well, right? So what fields are you working at?
Sure. So I'm unemployed. Someone please employ me. But I'm by trade, I'm a behavioral neuroscientist. So I work mainly in genetic and molecular work, but with animal behavior mostly. I've done some other work, but that's my field, neuroscience mainly.
So I'm not a researcher in the traditional sense. I have a master's degree in development studies, but most of the research I've done has sort of been by proxy, like through projects that the nonprofits I've worked at has done. So I've been able to look inside and reading your articles really interesting because it shows a very different side from just contributing to a research or something like that. It seems like such a fraternity. Looking into it, it's just such a weird system really that's I'm assuming is not producing the best research when it's structured that way.
Yeah,
I just wanted to add one more thing. Sorry. When you talk about best research, I heard a rumor. I do not know if this is true, but I heard that for the Nobel Prize, former Nobel Prize winners in the committee are the ones who nominate people for the next Nobel Prize. And in that regard, you see certain universities and certain institutes winning them far more than anyone else because they have more representation and they already have that kind of advantage per se. So sometimes the best research doesn't come out. Now, I do not know if this is 100% true. You might be able to confirm it. But because I've heard this from multiple sources, it kind of makes sense as well, right? Why certain institutes get a lot more Nobel laureates than others, although you find interesting research coming out from so many more places than actual winners.
Yeah, actually, you can cut this part afterwards, but I know a person from Sweden who works on this issue, like inequalities in Nobel Prizes. And I tried to Google up his name, but I completely forgot. So, but yeah, I don't know. Maybe I can just wrap it up. So, of course, if you think about the Nobel winning laureates and the institutions that they're coming from, yeah, of course, you can also find some inequalities in that area as well. And maybe this is, of course, inequalities are not something wrong in essence, right? So, yes, some institutions are better than others. Some institutions have more resources than the others. So eventually they have to be we are competing on resources as well. And then you can expect some uneven distribution in terms of productivities. This is obviously essential, or you can say that it's natural. But on the other hand, our own observational evidence indicated that. I can talk a bit vulgar if you allow me. So I was just observing academic diarrhea in our field. So, the same ideas were repeated so many times that bring no value to the system, except they are helping researchers to build careers. And so this is what we kind of found problematic and in the very first hand. Then I was asking, the reason why I was asking your research areas, I wanted you to name some top publications, top venues where you can submit your research that is considered as the Bible of your field.
For me, it would be Nature. Oh, it would be Nature or the Lancet, or those would probably be the big two. But then there's so many others. Behavior neuroscience would be one. Yeah.
Okay, related to that or following up. Yeah, sorry, Emma. I'm sorry. Yeah, please.
I think for me it would be JSTOR, Sage, Taylor and Francis. Those ones.
Okay,
if I remember correctly.
These are publishers though, so I was just asking the journals. The journals, as you said, Sahir. So how many articles you feel like if you publish in these venues, how many articles can change your career? Do you have any idea?
Honestly, for me, it would be one. One would change my career.
Indeed. So for so many, actually, being able to publish one article can change your entire career trajectory. But then, how would you feel if you see a person publishing around 60 papers in that same journal? Right? So, what is the value or added value of publishing that many papers? So, what is the reason for hyper-prolification or over-publication or over-productivity? So, these were also some of the questions that we wanted to ask. So, imagine that you're a young researcher and you would like to dedicate yourself to your field. And let's say that you are only considered as a successful researcher as long as you publish your manuscript in one single journal. So in some fields, there are limited set of journals where you can publish, and as long as you do it, you can be considered as successful or not. So there's even like a publication on this by Aguinis and the others, and indicating that there are some A-level journals, and these A-level journals, of course, determine the careers of researchers. But then it's getting more and more complicated to publish all these articles, because competition is getting higher. Globalization and many other dynamics affect these types of competitions. But on the other hand, you also see more and more people, researchers, elite researchers, dominating the space, which were more, I think, alarming. So what we do in our research, we took a look at the data in the last 60 years. And what we did, we take a look at the top journals in all fields, around 42 different journals, and we try to understand how the most productive researchers dominated the space and how their domination has increased over time. So we also did comparative analysis between human resource management as a single field, and organizational behavior, organizational psychology. So all these fields, if you compare all these journals, we see that the number of most productive article count has been increasing over time as well. So there are increasing pressures to publish, of course. The competition is growing, but if you expect that the competition is growing, then you would expect slightly more kind of improvement in the inequalities. But no. So some elite researchers have been more influential over time. So I was also wondering, what is the purpose of or benefit of publishing 700 paper if you already have 699? So, right, we are also questioning the system at the same time.
It sounds to me that this is an issue of money. I'm imagining that if you have a movie manuscript and you can attach Meryl Streep to that movie, you'll be like the chance of you getting funding for that movie will be a lot higher. And since the academic field is so competitive, getting funding for your research will be a lot easier if you have a really established author in your roster, right? Is that correct? Is that a fair assessment?
Sure, but there are a number of issues, Emma. So I can maybe also address these ones. So first of all, if you are already a productive researcher, you can, we call about this Merton's law. Matthew's law. So the more success brings, of course, the more fame, and then the more resources and so on. So if you're a well-known productive researcher, more students would like to work with you because you are becoming more renowned. Your fame allows, also affect maybe editors, not necessarily in a bad way, but in your reputation starts talking, and then more students would like to work with you, as I said. So more researchers attract more resources as a result. On the other hand, again, the issue here, although you are building up a career at the later stages of your career, not everything you publish is necessarily your own product. You are supervising. But again, you can exploit your own students. So you can supervise more and more students, and then their productivity means your productivity as well. So there are also increasing pressures and concerns around these areas too. So they are not independent from each other. And of course, if you are becoming more productive, of course, you get more funding, which is also quite natural. But at the same time, so why would one person would like to publish this many papers? Because we're also reading about slow science, the new movement, and Uta Fricht from the University College London, she was talking about how she's regretting of publishing this many articles in her career. So she has been if I'm not mistaken, she published over 400 articles, and then she publishes a paper on slow science, and she kind of confesses that she's regretting. But again, if you feel like, this is also kind of hypocritical in a way, kind of a problematic by definition. So you can say that after only you publish this many papers so that people can take you seriously. But if you're a young researcher and you realize that this game is kind of rigged or unfair or, unattainable, you may just quit. You don't want to do it. And as a result, we may lose so many people. We've discouraged so many people in the pipeline, in the process. Because again, these increasing pressures to publish creates kind of a wrong image in the field.
I I'll play devil's advocate for the, suppose, say, for the 600 publications or whatever. The argument could then be that each one of these is probably important. For one, in science, you don't prove something is wrong. You kind of slowly disprove it over time by showing a large amount of evidence. So would you say you need 300 versions of not the same, but slightly similar experiments, and each one's published to build up this entire thing to show a theory is right or a theory is wrong or a phenomena happens? So in that case, wouldn't you need to publish those many? Or are we talking more about just this one lab with this one person publishing these things again and again, and it not actually showing anything because it could only be working in that field, in that particular lab with that student or whatever?
Okay, that's a great question too, Sahir. So, but let me be the devil's advocate here as well. So I'll try to again convert your question in a different way. So once you are known in the field, are you still dependent on the system? So once you are known, you can just disseminate your knowledge and you can share your findings with a wider audience that you are referring to. So, but then this journal space is getting more competitive, and if you feel like your reputation, your work affects the outcome, because we know this story is like, if your work is rejected, you can, in the back door, you can try to find back doors in the backstage. You can talk to the editors. You can even create some pressures on the editors and your colleagues, whatever. So it's getting much harder for younger researchers to reject the submissions from the senior authors or elite scholars. So, but again, if you are an elite and already hyper prolific scholar, you're no longer dependent on the system. But so many people are. So again, we should also be questioning the system overall. So it's not about the elite publishing or elite reproducing themselves. So we should be questioning why we're concerned with the impact factors, or why we are giving so much importance on these things rather than, if our concern is to disseminate knowledge, we have much better ways to do it. So this is kind of the idea.
How would you say that that's impacting the quality of the research that's out there? If Sahir is correct in saying that we have 400 studies on similar topics, we end up getting a pretty standardized set of research questions, right?
But then, Emma, there is kind of the artificial prestige element playing role. So we believe that pieces published in these top journals are superior than the others. So this is kind of a wrong idea. And of course, these things create incentives as well. But if you remove all these incentives, would be willing to publish this many papers? So if our real concern is to communicate our research findings, we can do it. We can just open up a new website and we can just share our ideas. Universities can do it. So each university can, instead of paying for these incentives or subscriptions, they can build their own journals. And, I know that in reality, these things are more difficult. I am, not entirely naive to propose that this is the best way. But again, these prestige element creates kind of an artificial system and kind of a wrong idea that these papers published in top journals are better than the others. So often we know the opposite is the case. So if our real concern is to disseminate our knowledge, our findings, if we would like to contribute to the science, no one stops us. And incentives, again, distract in the wrong directions most of the time.
I actually find this very similar to other sorts of ideas. So how sometimes academia is just not just sorry, not academia, but schooling is kind of set up that if you've been to a certain school, you're automatically considered to be smarter or more prestigious than otherwise. I think a more very famous recent example is I think the foreign minister of Poland and the foreign minister of the UK were both mates at the same club at Oxford. Is David Cameron from Oxford? I might be wrong here, but they both literally were at the were literally at mates in school, and now they're the leading foreign ministers of their two respective countries. And it's funny how you being in a certain institute just kind of probably pushes you that further, although there might be, I don't know, like equally qualified people or equally as smart people in other institutes around the world who probably never got that opportunity just based on name recognition. And uh, the other thing, coming back to journals, we used to do this thing back in for the final year of honors. So honors is like fourth year undergrad or first year of masters, whichever university system you are in. And our supervisor and one of our lecturers used to bring out papers from the Lancet or Nature or any of these really high top publishing journals, and he'd be like, read them and please critique them because. And no, he'd just be like, read them, and we'd come back, and a lot of us would be like, oh, it's really good, this, that. And then he'd rip it to shreds, showing what's wrong with all of them. And kind of this idea that we think that this is good just because they're published there. It doesn't necessarily mean they're good. It's good research, or it's, yeah, you should be able to scrutinize these things and not just take them at face value on their name.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And since you also mentioned about these colleges and universities, elite colleges, so I think there are two researchers, if I'm not mistaken, from Harvard University and UPenn, Peter Blair and Ken Smetters, who talk about why elite colleges don't expand in supply. So they usually play on the card of selectivity and exclusivity rather than providing education with the resources. They can maybe reach wider audiences, but again, the way how they operate is based on the prestige, based on the selectivity, exclusivity, and so on. So again, the same way the journals are functioning. So they are proud to say that they are rejecting 95%, up to 95% of their submissions. But again, on the downside, if you realize that this may also be problematic, so it not necessarily indicates the rigor or the prestige. I mean, of course, it indicates maybe the prestige of a journal or due to its selectivity. But again, not all the rejected articles are in inferior quality or so on.
Do you think that the inequality that is quite obvious here is a reflection of the broader inequalities in society?
This is a good question. Yes, obviously. Yeah, as I said, there are many things interrelated to that extent. And yes, social inequality, social capital, social inequalities, all these things play a role. And again, the decolonization of business schools are becoming more and more important topic. We talk about the influence of the weird context, Western, educated, democratized, industrialized, and rich, democratic and industrialized and rich countries. So if you look at the literature, yes, we have samples from these countries, researchers from these countries, journals from these countries. Of course, they dominate the space, the scholarly space, the intellectual space. But I mean, does it mean that they are providing the absolute truth? So we should also question these things. Maybe there are in some other parts of the world, there are different realities, different, absolute truths, or they can compete with to some extent.
It seems to me that if the people who are most likely to get published go into journals are the people who are just generally more privileged in society, like white men, from Western countries, from all these universities, then that will then reflect in the research that they produce, right? which makes sense to me. I remember hearing about how research in medicine is generally quite sexist and quite racist and those things, which then bleeds into how medicine is provided. So it seems that the inequality that is quite evident in the fields that you talk about is then, bleeds, like it circles back into society with, the information that it provides. It seems that it can have quite a great impact on the way that society functions generally. Is that correct?
Let me be more specific, Emma, in that sense. So we know that institutions are, there are institutional disparities. Some institutions are better represented, overrepresented versus others. We know that again, inequalities in terms of countries, discriminations in terms of gender, all these things. We already have some set of evidence around these issues. But what our research has indicated, we also can talk about kind of a figure, kind of an image of a scholar that appears in top journals as the top productive scholar. For instance, like if you look at these, 40 journals, we analyzed 42 journals. Yes, male dominant. Yes, they're all senior authors. Yes, they're all bald. They have gray hair. They're white. They wear glasses. They have, green or blue eyes. So we can even talk about the inequalities in an individual level. Yes, societal level we know, but again, so there are rarely you rarely find black scholar that is highly productive. You rarely find immigrant or non-US author being highly productive. Again, there are exceptions, of course, to this rule, but you rarely see a female scholar being top publisher. So, yes, and yeah, all these things are problematic, of course.
Can we then? I really think we should go into the actual numbers of your research because we haven't actually spoken about them yet, and we're 37 minutes in. Because we've gone through a lot of concepts and ideas and how it reflects in society, but it would be really cool to now have actual stats behind this. So could you go through a bit of your work and what you found?
Sure. I just opened my stats, but of course I don't want to bore the listeners with the numbers because they are quite detailed, but I can talk about some numbers, of course. So I was talking let me just try to be more specific, and I know that this is also alarming for my career as well. Okay, so but I'm gonna do it. JAP, the Journal of Applied Psychology. So in our field, in my field, it's the Bible. So one paper can change your life. And of course, we would like to understand how the top productive researchers, how many articles, the top 10 published on average. So we found the number of 38 or 39 on average. Like imagine that top 10 most productive researchers in the field publishing at JAP published on average 39 articles. So, and the top scholar, if I'm not mistaken, is about 55 during the period we covered. Still counting, by the way, maybe it reached 60 or 65. So again, this indicates a huge inequality in some senses. And we also compared the organizational psychology research compared to human resource management and management. And when we look at the averages of our organizational psychology journals, we've seen that top 10 most productive of each journal published on average about 18 articles. So top 10 has 18 in each journal. So this is like the average of the field. But if you look at HRM and management, it's much lower. So we would like to understand also the comparisons between and within the fields. So more than that, we also wanted to understand how researchers operating in fields function in different ways. So if you look at the numbers from the industrial and organizational psychology, top 10 scholars, the most published scholars, has an average of 95 papers in their careers. Almost 95 papers. But if you look at management and HRM, it's like 50 and 40. And these numbers are kind of indicative to indicate some sort of inequalities. So we say that yes, management and organizational research is problematic, But we found that organizational psychology is even worse in terms of these inequalities. And we would like to understand how many authors published more than 60 papers in their careers. So we also took a look at these numbers per field. In HRM, we found no researchers publishing more than 60 papers. In management, we only found one person. But in organizational psychology research, we found around 23 researchers publishing more than 60 papers. So, but at the same time, there are more numbers of researchers trying to publish in the field, but maybe they just leave. They realize that the field is more competitive that they can handle, so they just bail. They just like leave the field. And again, this indicates kind of in order to build a sustainable career in the field, it indicates a problem. So we also took a look at the Gini coefficients in each field. And organizational psychology field is the only field that has a Gini coefficient over 50%, which you can maybe compare with the economy of Angola, which is highly unequal society in terms of income distribution. So again, the other fields, HRM and management, they're maybe not much better, but again, all these inequalities have been rising over time, which is indicating another problematic issue. So I think I kind of summarized all these numbers in a nutshell, but I would like to, of course, discuss these things after things get published. So I would love to get some reactions on these numbers.
You said that the field is getting more competitive. You also speak about sort of the issues for early career researchers and how guidance is given to them and kind of indoctrinated that, and they're kind of indoctrinated into a certain style of writing, a certain style of application, and a certain style of they're basically influenced by their senior elite researchers to do certain things. How does that play into this, and does that mean you see a lot of students of these researchers also getting high productivity, or do compared to others?
Thanks for that question as well, Sahid. So again, I was just mentioning, imagine that you are a young scholar trying to build a career in the field. And again, imagine that you dedicate your entire career in the field and you would like to be considered within the Hall of Fame in the field. So again, if you look at the numbers, this is not an easy game. So there is no way that you can publish 60 papers in the top journal you're operating in within our field. So practically almost impossible, virtually impossible. So again, how this number can provide hope for future generations. Even if you don't eat and sleep and do nothing and only try to publish in your entire career, it's not feasible. Okay? So again, how can we consider that this can create hope for the future generations of scholars? We should also, again, question this. The editors who are working in these top journals, of course, they are trying to influence young researchers in a nice way, in a positive way. They are saying that, okay, we're in the publishing business. We would like to publish your work. Send your best work to our journal. But the reality is, again, you see that the reproduction of form is functioning. So same kinds of methodologies, epistemologies, ideas, they replicate because they are familiar. The style is quite obvious. In some journals, there are even like pro forma templates that you have to be complying with. So there is less and less liberty in academia. And again, we should be questioning all these things. Basically, I can answer to this question this way.
The way that you describe like how stressful it is, sleeping and not eating, that surely has an impact on the people within that structure, right? Can you talk about how that is visible in the field?
Of course. So in all unequal society, there are some health-related problems as well. Since the income is distributed unevenly, there is also violence. There is also like problematic things within the society. The same things apply in academic fields. Yes, if you have this pressure, you have burnout crisis. And if you see that the game is not easy, but you have to kind of prove that you have, you made it your career. But then again, maybe you cheat, maybe you try to find, shortcuts. And maybe that's why we recently realized that so many researchers published cannot be replicated. And there are so many researchers that are fraudsters, that, they just fabricate data. So again, these rising pressures are not functioning well. They only maybe function well for a certain percentage of individuals, but then the remaining researchers are suffering. So all burnout crisis, as I mentioned, all these pressures, all these incentives, all these rising concerns, all the dependency on tuition for research, for funding. So all these things create, of course, unfair, problematic practices. And yeah, I have to correct myself. Unintended outcomes. Maybe that's the better word to describe it. Let me also check if we should, cover some other things. Yeah, there are some specific numbers, but I have to keep them as, not disclosed, right, Sahir? Because I have some statistics that I have to keep them, because once I, talk about them, they also refer to some certain individuals, and I want to make sure that it's not like, I want to disturb people anyways, but I don't want to harass them, or I don't want to reveal their identities. Okay.
Yep. That's completely fine.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Can I then ask, what do you think are the best ways to fix these inequalities? What kind of things do you suggest we do? And what are some of the short-term things we can do? What are some of the more longer-term things you'd like to see changed? Because the more you talk about this, the more I realize this is just a reflection of society. So,
True. Maybe the unfortunate thing, I don't have the right answer to give to this one, because it's a complex problem. So I can only indicate that there is a problem, but the solution is more complicated than the problem itself. So again, so many institutions are competing on resources, and student tuition, like the tuition fees, are a huge resource for universities. And of course, rankings play a huge role on this, and publications also influence rankings. So there is kind of a game that are out there. So there is a ranking game. There is a ranking pressure. So rising pressures are creating problems. If I'm not mistaken, Adam Mastroianni suggested to kind of resist within this system. And yeah, what you can do, you just make these things more apparent. You have to be talking to your academic leaders, your managers. You maybe, I mean, if you work on a certain topic, you have to be doing your research with, your passion, and don't let others to evaluate yourself with the numbers or with the quality of publications. Quality, I mean impact factor or the prestige of a journal you're publishing. So each work is valuable, and as long as there are incentives, of course, people will be competing against these resources, again, rewards and similar things. But then the real value of research is research itself, the study itself, the findings themselves. So you have to be focusing on research, and you have to be like negotiating with your department head. I know that it's not easy, but maybe your deans, maybe, we have to be pushing them in a different direction, that publications in top journals is not the only thing that should count, right? There are other alternative channels that you can influence, that you can make an impact. I don't know, policy making, I don't know, again, presence in social media, writing a blog. All these things should count as intellectual property, as long as you're providing some value in the field. So, and what I also feel that, I mean, there are increasing numbers of researchers working on these issues. So everyone has started complaining about the problematic areas, right? So these things are rather becoming more people feel more ease to talk about these issues these days. So you could not imagine talking about discrimination or, I don't know, the inequalities maybe 20 years ago, 30 years ago. These things are becoming more concerning these days. So again, things maybe will change. Things will change quite slowly, but surely they should change.
Yes, no, I agree. I was just going through your papers and I'm trying to think of any key things which you haven't covered, which you wanted to. So what, maybe I should ask the question to you, what were certain things which you wanted to cover, which we haven't touched yet? And
yeah, maybe I can also talk about the type of work we have been doing in the last couple of months, years, maybe. Because like
yeah, go on.
the academic rackets. So these networks, how they're influencing people's careers. So in the last few years, we kind of function as investigative journalists rather than researchers. So we try to understand hidden meanings as well. So the discourse analysis, these critical discourse analysis, in order to understand the hidden meanings and hidden messages that are conveyed to the younger researchers. In just like a few years ago, we entered to a Meet the Editor session, in which we kind of play the role of early career researcher. And we try to understand how unethical messages are conveyed so easily. So, and some of them were really shocking. I realized, I remember that some of the editors, they recommended young researchers to co-author with big names, even though these big names provide no contribution. So, it was kind of shocking, as I said, to hear these unethical practices to be accepted as norms in academia. Of course, there are quick ways to make a career, maybe. Yes, you can have your big names in your papers, and of course they can increase their productivities. It's kind of a win-win game, and then their name affects the quality or the perception of the quality of your papers. But if you start questioning the ethical considerations, then yeah, things are really pretty alarming at every level. So we try to understand these things with our recent research paper that will be published in Management Learning, academic rackets paper, and how these rackets kind of protect their status quo over time by influencing young researchers. It's pretty interesting research. I would encourage everyone to read that paper, how they emerge and how they sustain themselves.
Well, yeah, I can talk about it from just a personal level of when you ask, when you're writing a paper, you've heard it multiple times. When I was at King's College, I heard it a few times. When I was at Victoria University, I've heard it a few times, being like, oh, we should try to get this person on the paper as well, or this person on our grant, because it will be more likely that it will succeed because they're big names. And yeah, the idea of it being self-fulfilling, because if that works, then that's going to keep working, and it encourages people to do things like that. Although I guess the big names you're trying to put in have added no real value. Well, probably resource value because you're getting it published in a higher journal, but they're not adding any actual value to the research itself. You're probably adding it to the exposure. But if you change the system, and yeah.
Except the signaling value, as you said. Yeah, the signaling effect. So the rest, as you said, maybe no direct valuable contribution to the paper. But it was, again, how people can be comfortably share these things in a public setting is more alarming. Maybe, I can maybe suggest you to do these things in a, private sessions. Look, Sahir, these are the ways. Maybe, you try to, but again, this can be friendly conversation, right? So between behind the doors, we can talk about these things. But if you are an editor, you have also a responsibility towards the scientific community, and you should be protecting the principles, scientific principles. And you should be, of course, more careful with what kinds of messages you're sending, conveying to the potential authors.
Yeah, I agree. Emma, from in your field, do you see similar things? Because I know you don't do research, but do you see kind of similar issues pop up in terms of disseminating of information or getting grants to do your work and things like that?
Yeah, I mean it's starting to change, I think, but yeah, like it's very similar. You get that like cookie cutter like expectation of what they want. All these like application forms that require very similar things. And it's also a lot about the numbers game here. It's like how many people can we impact? It's not really about like the quality of the impacts. It's like, okay, there's a program that wants to get people in jobs, so they want to get as many people into jobs as possible. So instead of focusing on maybe like the really hard cases that haven't been, employed for ages, they'll focus on like the easy ones, just so they can they can increase like the number that will say in the reports will be higher. I also think in terms of funding, it's something that really requires intervention. They will ask, like the funders and the grant makers will ask the like tiny NGOs to create these like really elaborate reports on like, well, you impacted this many people in this way, and like the long-term effect, and like making reports that really no one has the capacity to do if they want to do like proper like actual work. I think it sort of signifies similar sort of structural problems. I think like the whole system just needs to change, but I do also think that it sort of moves with capitalism. It seems like the same issues I have with capitalism of it being like about productivity and like people last is sort of is indicating similar issues to what you're describing. So it's just about it's just about a numbers game. How many publications can you get out there? Not really about the impact and the quality of the content. So yeah, I think it's very indicative of my field as well.
I had one more question about academic rackets. So when you're talking about, because racketeering is considered like a whole organizational, well, you hear it in the sense of crime organizations and things like that. In this regard, who are we talking about? We know journal editors encourage people to do this and this and that. So if um, so what about who is kind of involved in this? Do universities benefit from this in a way, or who are the real benefactors from doing this? Does the editor really benefit from just putting the same researcher up versus, putting a multitude of researchers up whose work quality is probably better than having 60 people from one journal, 60 people, having 60 publications from the same person in one journal? Why wouldn't you have 60 good publications from different authors in your journal? Wouldn't that make it stronger?
Sure. Now, there is also a problem here in this thing. When we talk about research integrity or transparency and openness, we believe that researchers should be transparent, open in their research processes. But on the other hand, we don't see these things in the editorial processes. We don't know what has been decided behind the closed doors. So editors are also competing. So they're competing for citations, they're competing for readership, and they know that once they invite more famous authors, more productive authors, the citations they get will be increasing. They can signal more selectivity because of these citations, because they can increase their impact factor these ways. And of course, that means that the publishers are also earning money out of this, right? So again, this game is not really independent from the system that we're having in our societies. Again, this capitalistic system works in the same way in academia. There are obvious reasons, as I said, that affect the editorial decision. I mean, why would you publish a paper from a Nigerian scholar whose university has never heard, that can almost, confidently tell you that will receive no citation versus a big shot? So, of course, that impacts your citation numbers. Citation numbers impact your impact factor, your rankings, and so on. So, of course, there are legitimate reasons and understandable, reasonable reasons why people, editors, are doing so.
Nice. Okay, I noticed that we've been recording for an hour. So, Emma, did you have any final questions? Or did you have any questions that you didn't get to?
Did I depict really a dark picture here?
Yes, you did.
Okay.
A little bit. Like, so younger people, harder to find jobs, can't starting families later, can't really afford houses, and also can't really publish in high impact journals. No, so do you have, because you also said that you try to put a positive spin on things, so maybe we can end on that. What are the kind of more positive takeaways from this, from your work? And maybe we can end on positive notes.
Yeah, of course. I can also talk about the recent movement that we started with my colleagues, the Future of Work and Organizational Psychology, FOWOP movement. FOWOP.eu is our website. So in our field, we would like to, again, promise some hope, try to, connect with younger researchers to build a better future. So if we can resist against these things collectively, of course, we can get more results. And we believe that, I can also tell you that I am kind of reaching to a stage where I can feel more privileged. So I have more academic freedom. I can talk about these things without any fear. And maybe I can do another job as well. But as long as I tell the truth, so I don't really mind if I can get a job or not. So I'm at this level of my career. I was always questioning the field anyways, even in the past, even as a younger researcher, even as a PhD researcher. But now, I think together with my colleagues, as I mentioned, Matthijs and Yvonne, so we are kind of committed to provide hope for the future generations. And we try to our best to get connected, to do these things, to work on these problematic issues, to disturb the system, to disturb the actors who can influence the system. So on a positive note, yes, we believe that the future will be much, brighter anyways. At the expense of our careers, by the way.
Awesome. So if with that, should we move on to the more wrap-up stuff? Awesome. So, all right. So the way it goes is, I'll just have a few questions for you.
Sure.
We've been going back and forth of whether she should ask the questions or be quiet or answer them. And I think it would be more fun if she answers them as well, to be honest, because this is her first time on here. So this is like 7 or 8 questions. So you guys can take turns one after the other and answer them. Some are shorter, others are longer. If that's okay with you as well, Emma? Sweet. Awesome. So I guess as our guest of honor, Mehmet can answer first and then Emma can answer second. All right. So first one, cats or dogs?
Dogs.
Emma?
Cats.
All right. Movies or TV shows?
TV shows, maybe?
Yeah, TV shows as well.
All right. So for both of you, if your life were TV shows, what genre would they be?
Emma, you go first.
Oh, I have no idea. Like a drama, probably.
Yeah, upsetting comedy.
One of those dark comedies. Those are great. All right. What is your least favorite cuisine?
I can go first on this one. I lived in the Czech Republic about 15 years almost. And yeah, Czech cuisine.
Not good.
Yeah. The torture was so, severe. Yeah, I'm so sorry, but I love the beer.
I'm Danish, so I will say Danish, the Danish cuisine. I feel like I can diss my own country.
All right. Okay. What animal do you think you could beat in a fight?
I live in Paris, and rats are our enemies. Probably, I'm at the rat level.
Okay.
I'm weak. I can't. Maybe like a fly. Like I'm not. It's a losing game for me.
It's fun. I've changed up a few questions for that reason. All right, this one's a common. This is a common one, but to ask for these things, but I like it, so I've kept it. What superpower would you like to have, and why?
To get published
Anywhere.
anywhere, yeah.
I've thought about this a lot. There's a show called Teen Titans, if you remember that. It was on during when I was a kid, and there was the green one which could transform into any animal, and I thought that was so smart because you could fly, you could just transform yourself into a bird, and you could be very little or very big. I feel like that's the perfect superpower.
Yeah, the shape-shifting in general is a good idea.
Yeah.
I like that idea. All right, what is the dumbest thing someone has tricked you into believing or doing?
The academia is fair. This is the saying, like the general saying that you hear from all the editors, all the top researchers. Yeah.
Oh, I'm gonna take something similar and say that the charity and the nonprofit sector is benevolent.
Is it not?
No, it's deeply corrupt.
All right. What about this? Is there a saying which you've heard people say or believe which you think is complete bullshit?
We only publish the best work. Again,
with the theme.
I can just go around the same lines forever, I guess.
To me, it's everything happens for a reason.
Nah.
I don't like that one.
But doesn't
it's terrible, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a good way to keep. I guess it's kind of like it is what it is. Just to keep you.
Exactly. It's just like, oh, this child gets born with HIV. Oh, everything happens for a reason. I was like, nah, shit happens. It's like terrible things happen without a reason, and it's fine.
All right, guys. The very last question. If you had to leave us with one piece of advice, so for all the people listening, what would that be?
This is really tough, Sahir.
Yeah, you guys might need to take a little bit of time.
Yeah, life is short will be really bullshit, right? I don't
That's
know.
fine. We've gotten a variety of answers. That's why this is my favorite question.
Oh yeah.
People take it in many ways.
Yeah, I don't have any. So I don't have any. This is like the sentence. I don't have any.
Yeah. Fair enough. It's a cop-out, but fair enough.
I think to me, it would be that to get every person to the same level, certain people have to be okay with losing out on some of the privileges.
I like that. I don't know how many people who are listening would feel that they're in a privileged position / willing to lose it. I don't know how it would go, but yeah, I guess it's a fact of life, right? If someone needs to gain something, then someone is probably going to lose something as well. But yeah, awesome. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you everybody for listening. Mehmet, thanks so much. I look forward to seeing how well your research is taken up by the wider world. Now, hopefully, we are also, we're also broadcast on Wellington Radio now. So you'll have a few more listeners than what we did previously, which is nice. And yeah, thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for inviting me.
Emma, thank you as well. I look forward to having you on for other episodes as well.
Thank you, Sahir. Thank you, Mehmet.
Thanks guys. Awesome. And everyone else, thanks for listening again, and take care.